go in there and do a cul-de-sac, right? It brings you all the way to the water. Okay, it says road closed, but it's not true. It's open and you can get directly on the bridge from West End. Okay, so don't pay attention.
The space between those two buildings is already public.
So that's already the city, the public, has a right of way. It belongs to the city, to the building. They run the security and they do whatever they want to do with it. But the city reserved a right of way to be, and therefore the public.
Okay.
And so you can, but don't go there and go there and be quiet, and because it's people live there. But you can go inside with the car, go around, look at the water. That would be number 2. Number 3, the rest of them are not really all that good in the sense of they're just alleyways. And in fact, this building is a sister building to the building on the other side of the Mondrian. This building is a flip of that building. When you walk or drive down the street, and stand at that corner, and you'll see this alley. And it's a service alley, and in fact, it looks horrible. But if we had a bay walk, that would be one of the entrances that you guys would, the architect with the landscape, would be landscaping. That would be a secondary kind of minor entrance, right? And like that one, there would be 3 more. Look them up in Google. All of the streets you see running into the water and stopping there, those are alleys. So that in the end you have what? You have 2 main entrances, right? That you have to do spectacular entrances of the sort that beckon people to go there. They announce themselves, right? I'm looking to see something vertical, right? What projects better, the horizontal or the vertical? The vertical, right? So 2 vertical entrances. The rest of them can be minor ones. The main ones address everybody, even the ones that don't know the city, the tourists. The minor ones, we would all know where they are. They don't have to be announced, right? They have to be safe, etc., etc. Okay, so that deals with the interface between the city and the bay walk itself. Now let's go to the bay walk itself. What does it want to be? Can it serve hot dogs? No. So don't come up. You will have a little bit of leeway in the program. You will be able to tell me, I want to do this. What do you think? Right? And you invent something. But let's nuke them right now and tell you what you will not be able to do. No food service. Right? The city would not allow that. It's not just me, it's the city. Would not the city has a department called DERM, DERM, and they're a pain in the neck, and they need to be. And they will not allow anything that risks throwing dirt or grease, fat and that sort of thing, in the water. So no food services. Do we need bathrooms? No, we don't. Okay, I know that we have public bathrooms in the parks, like whatever the name of that park is on Ocean Drive, but we don't have them on the boardwalk. Right? So
the entrance?
You could, if you want to propose, like they do. They have these huge public bathrooms but only in 1 or 2 or 3 locations. Perhaps 1 there, 1 here. I will not be requiring that you do that. If you do, it wouldn't be on the bay walk itself, right? It would be on the ground, like those public bathrooms are, which are not on the bay walk or the boardwalk. So that's number 2. The most important thing that you will have to master to be successful at this, the only way that an office could make money doing this, and the only way the city would have the monies to pay for it, is if you become extremely efficient. Because, mind you, it's a mile and something. I haven't measured it, but it looks like 1.5 miles or 2. You think you're going to design 1.5 miles? That would be like designing the Empire State Building 10 times. So the only solution that I can think of is that you do this using prototypes. And you saw that in design 1, right? What a prototype is. What it's going to be is not 1, but a collection of prototypes that, like Lego pieces, connect. You can connect them, but they're different, so that you offer different programmatic functions so that you don't become boring, right? Because they will not look the same. Um, Perhaps the best example of using prototype in a way that the prototypes disappear and something else springs up is Bayside. Bayside is a building built with prototypes. If you go there next time, you can even count the number of prototypes that went into making that building, and there's no more than 8 or 9. And at that office, because this was designed in Boston, at that office in Boston where they designed Bayside, but I bet if you had gone there at the point when they were doing it, you would see 6 or 7 teams of people working, each one of them on one prototype, fully resolving it, working out all of the kinks, right? And coming up with these spectacular things that when you combine them, they suddenly disappear, right? It's like bringing trees together that make a forest. When the forest is visible, you don't pay attention to the trees anymore, right? So when you go to Bayside, try to identify those smallest portions of the buildings that you see repeat themselves. That's a prototype. Okay, so back to the Baywalk though. What are these prototypes that you're going to want to design? They're gonna have to be functional. So let's go to program. What do you expect the Bayside to do? Would you want people with bicycles to go on it? City will say yes. You cannot stop them. Would you want people to go there and be able to sit down and read a book or take in the view or hold hands? Yes, right? So it's the beach. So think about these functions that you want to be performed on the Baywalk. That's not going to be, I'm not going to give you a list of the functions, right? I give you the program, but you figure out human use. And I've given you 2 already. Do you want to stroll? I would say yes. Do you want to jog or run? Yes. And you see, we already have 4. So, but although we can combine perhaps jogging and strolling together, would you combine bicycle and strolling together? Wouldn't that be dangerous? Okay, so we already have a problem. And the problem is that there's got to be a path for the bicycle, but there's got to be a path for the pedestrian. And what was the first thing we said? Taking in the view and holding hands. There's going to have to be at least, I don't know, a path, but a space or a collection of spaces, and let them be a lot of spaces that allow you to sit down and take in the view. Hey, Enrique, how was the stretching? Good. We have to talk. I know I owe you something. I forgot what it was. Call me tomorrow. Tomorrow something. Okay. So the highest in the state. What if you were to design either a place for dogs to hang out and play, a turf of some sort? What if you were to design something that catches their debris if they want it to go, right? That, by the way, would get us in trouble with DERM, but what I would like you to explore is the ability to retain that and have it emptied by a crew of people that would go there. I mean, they have to go there anyway because you will have trash cans and you'll have things they have to pick up. So I already came up with 4 prototypes, right? And we have bicycles and separately for the safety of pedestrians and the bicyclists. Runners and walkers together. We have a place for people to sit down. They're going to want to sit down. This takes us to another dimension. When you sit down, do you still want to be under the sun? Give them an option. Some people will, but some other people, me included, look at what we did. We came out of the sun, sat down here because of the shade. So, prototype number 5 or 6. Or, this would be the most sophisticated solution concerning shade. What if you were to do 2 systems that work horizontally? You have the surface of the floor, which is what will address the cyclist, the pedestrian, the people sitting down, holding hands, so on and so forth. Let's call that horizontal. And then you have a system which is vertical. will reach up there and hold something for the shading device. What if these two things were independent, such that you can lay the floor and then at will give a section of it shade and some other section no shade? That would give you more independence, right? What if you were to do this vertical, independent of the horizontal, what if the shading itself is of a different sort? There's solid shade, there's percolating shade, right? So I already told you of two. What if you gave me, or the city, the owner of that, the person that will finally put it together, an option? Perhaps this section where the people run, perhaps they want to run in percolated shade so that they get a little bit of light, but they don't get toasted. What if you design a section where people sit down? I wouldn't want to sit down in percolated means, by the way, spotted shade. Right? Okay. What if I wanted to read a book there? I'm going to want to be in solid shade. It's going to take me 2 hours to do that. I'm going to get burned if I don't go into solid shade. So think about don't try not to give me prototypes that incorporate the shading into them, because what that does is every time I want to use this prototype, it will bring the shade with it. And there will be times when I don't want to shade in that particular prototype. So detach the two. Make this system independent from that system. Let me combine it. You would be combining it as the architect, but I would have the ability as the owner or the city to tell you, I don't want shade here, take a little bit of shade off of here, so on and so forth. Okay? Next item. And I know I say, and this is an important one. In fact, all of them are important. But this is a tricky one. A lot of the people, when you go into a building on the water anywhere on Earth, you're going to pay more money if you buy looking at the water than if you buy looking away. Do you think these people would be happy if after paying that money you block their view with something? Because I don't know that they would be happy. Now, that wouldn't be so much of a problem here because of the elevation, but like I said, this is only 25% of the length. You have 75% of the population. They're going to complain. They're going to go to City Hall. They will billboard City Hall for months to stop the project because you're going to build something in front of their view. No matter how nice that is, they're not going to like it. So that's an issue. When you deal with the shade, and you're going to have to give them shade, that's not an option. You're going to have to think not so much of a solid canopy as one built with fins. And think about this concept. The shade, the sun comes in this way, so you have to stop it, and obviously you can stop it like this, but you can also stop it like this. This is a little less efficient than this, but when you do this, if you have them, separate from each other, from this angle, you will be able to see through it uninterruptedly. You'll see thousands of these lines, sure, but there's going to have to be some give and take, right? The city will tell them, enough is enough. We're not blocking your view. We're just putting a few lines in there, and at the same time, we're providing comfort to the users who will then go on it, walk all the way to Lincoln Road, and spend the money we want them to spend. Everybody's happy. So that's another little note you may want to use. There's going to be sections that will be problematic in that they may be blocking views. You're going to use these fins, right? But that leads us into another point. How invisible will that bay walk be? It's fighting against what? And why do I call it invisible? It's fighting against the largest bay we have in Florida, which is, Bay Biscayne, or Biscayne Bay. If you set anything against that bay, it will have a tendency to disappear. And if you're looking at it from the point of view of the water, because you're on the back of a boat, looking in this direction, you're setting it against these mammoth buildings. And this was one of the big ones. It's now one of the small ones. Some others, are 40 stories tall. So you're going to have to consider ways by which you make the bay walk stand out. The only way you can do that is sculptural. I'll explain that. When I told you to go linear like this because you would be using fins that, because they're stacked like this, they would let me from this angle see through. going so linear that you will be invisible. How do you go sculptural? You go sculptural like this. How do you want to do sculpture? You don't want to do it solid. You are not going to stucco anything. There's no wood form used there whatsoever. It wouldn't last a year. You're going to do it with canvas. When you walk or when you drive back to the city by the seaport, look at those nice little pointy white canvases at the very end. There's those are prototypes those are modular construction. So that's a lot of what you see there will be the feeling that you get from your own Baywalk. That's a modular system. You're going to be using a modular system here too. So you're going to go sculptural, except make a mental note. You will have to identify those points along the line, or you're not going to tick anyone off by blocking their view. You see how sculptural will be blocking the view? But it will be doing that in adding something nice to the view. If you add something nice to the view in a space that is neutral, you will in fact be the love of the town. People will love you for it. Except don't plant them in front of a condominium, window, because you would be upsetting someone. So now we have a discussion of formal issues in which the Baywalk will have a tendency to become invisible. You have to make it pop out. In the process of making it pop out, you may incur the wrath of owners by blocking their view. So be mindful where you place these sculptural forms. Right? Comfort. How much comfort do you want to provide the user? Ask yourself this question. When you go to the boardwalk, I was running down the beach this morning. What kind of comfort do I expect to find there? Well, perhaps water fountain, and not all over the place either, in very spotty locations. I do want a few benches for when I have to do something with my shoe, but outside of that, what else can you really expect to find there? Right? Shade, protection from the wind for when you want to sit down. Privacy. Privacy wouldn't be an issue on the boardwalk itself. That's 100% public. But then think about this. This is a 100% private security. So security and privacy will be issues here. You're going to want to make it such that they cannot visually intrude too much into our pool deck, right? What about, like the older man that I said hello to has a grandchildren here, girls and boys in their 15, 16. What if he saw a band of people standing on the Baywalk looking at the grandchild? Would you like that? It wouldn't be a good thing. So privacy. How do you deal with not being too intruding too much? What else can we talk about that will become important? You don't have to concern yourselves with parking, right? We will expect that parking will take place on the streets and that's it. Back to the issue of this becoming running the risk of becoming invisible. It would be ideal if, as you come in through the causeway, or when you're sometimes literally parked on the bridge waiting for the light to change, that you could see a couple of, this is called a node, N-O-D-E. A node is an element, an architectural one usually, right? But it can be like an obelisk or a water fountain. Paris is famous for this. London too, in a certain way. All of these public spaces in Europe that are famous, notice next time you look at pictures of where you go, have a node or a collection of nodes, something usually in the center that call your attention to it from very far away. Because what happens is, when you're on foot, that square way out there, which is maybe super famous, you will not see it. What you see is the node standing up, and that's what beckons you to go there. So based on that principle, I would love for you guys to tackle this. How can you present the owner of that vehicle, which is stuck on the bridge for 10 minutes before he arrives here, with an introduction to the baby? How can you tell them these are the main points of entry, or look at me, I'm pretty, or don't you want to come here? I think you want to do that by via of not public advertisement on the papers, but an architectural intervention, something vertical, a node. What would that node be? It's obvious that it would have to be something of a nautical, look, right? Don't do a classical column, and don't do something silly like a water jet or something that would be in competition with the water itself, right?
No tower with like an Android barcode. So
No. But something like a sail, or something, or something that engages. I try to become inventive because that this is the time to
like those temporary shades you were talking about, we could use those. Like we could have a large structure that could provide shade, but also work as
at the same time as a node to advertise or to communicate.
Aesthetic anyway, so
that could be a good. Now, what if you were to? What are the strongest forces present here in your site? We're not doing anything with the spirit of the place. That's an exercise you would do in Sign 3. But there's such a thing in architecture that expects that you deal with and address the spirit of the place. Ego Loci is the name of that, and I or someone will make you read that book. There is a spirit of the place here, and it consists mainly of water and the wind, and obviously light. Of these two, water and wind are kinetic, aren't they? They move all the time. So can you devise an instrument or something that is activated by the forces of the wind or the water or a combination of the two, so that these nodes are in fact kinetic? And they function because they move. And you're standing on that bridge, and you see this thing change forms, very slowly through the power of the wind or something. You're attracted to it. You're wondering, what is that? You end up here, right? Okay, so the power present here is mainly water and wind, although you have to deal with light. But light doesn't have that kinetic effect on things, so we're not going to make it part of this mechanism. But try to see if you can incorporate the other two into a working mechanism that does stuff, right? Which takes me to this point. What if, because you're being responsive to the powers present here, what if portions of that bay, the floor itself, were to go up and down with the tide? And how cool would that be? And how problematic would that be? Right? Because after all, it would be portions of it, and when you drop too much, you would be out of cue with the rest of the surface you're walking on. So it does bring problems with it, but no problems that cannot be solved. The payback, I think, is quite substantial because it would be exciting, right? It would do something for sure. It's going to drop people below my angle of view. So a lot of these people living here, not so much us here because we're so elevated, but other people would be delighted at the idea that certain weeks of the month, when the lowest tide, they wouldn't even be able to see the heads of the people because the floor would drop so much that. So explore that idea of becoming responsive to these forces by mechanisms that themselves move, and that could include the floor going up and down. Those floors exist, by the way. You just put them on pontoons, and you anchor them, right? And they go up and down via rings. This is the pier that goes in the water. The ring that goes, attaches to the floor, and it goes up and down like this. And so therefore it doesn't float away. And it goes up and down because the floor system itself is sitting on pontoons, floating devices, capable of sustaining great weight. So the system itself exists, but you would have to then incorporate it into this if you want, right? I'm just giving you ideas as to how to respond to the forces along the site. What do we do when we get to the end of Lincoln Road and the end of here at 5th? This were a real project, that would be an issue, right? I don't expect that you will design anything for those two locations. There would be discussions about how to leave it open-ended such that if you wanted to enlarge this in the future, you would be able to. So don't pay too much attention to these two ends. What do I want for when we look at this for the first time? Because remember that we're doing this now because I wanted to do it early. But we're not working on the bay walk yet, right? You're all aware of that. We're not doing anything on the bay walk. There's the research. You're doing the research first, but when we come back to the bay walk, and if you want to start doing this now, I would expect to see some 4 to 5 prototypes on that first discussion of yours. I aim to have each one of you produce some 8 to 10 prototypes, which is what I think will accommodate all of the program I will give you, plus the 1 or 2 things you want, I know you will want to do, that you make up on your own. And that abundance of prototypes, because you're going to be able to mix them so much, will prevent this from becoming something tedious and repetitive and boring, right? So about 8 to 10 towards the end. The first time we taught, 4 to 5, right? These prototypes, I'll show you examples of prototypes so that you know what they look like. They're going to be what size? There will be length, right, going this way, and there will be width, correct? The width no longer or wider than 30 feet. 30 feet is the width of the bay walk, right? I know that sounds super abundant, but you will be running out of space very fast. I'm going to make it tight. 30 feet is in fact tight. Okay, so 30 feet in that direction. Now, how would you begin to deal with the idea of linear length? What would those big factors be? Oscar, you can close that if you want to. Yeah, it goes down the rod. What would that main factor be that determines the possible length of this unit or this prototype? Think of the coastline. All right, is any coastline in the world perfectly straight? No, it's going to be crooked. So therefore, think of this concept. If the coastline is like this, and I wanted to make a prototype, and I made it the length of my finger, it's going to have a problem here at this point, right? You see how I created a triangle here of empty space. You see that? Because my resolution, the size of this, is way too big, too long. So let's make it now the size of the flange. I can do this a number of times. You see how much tighter it becomes? Because it's so small, I can close in the distance. So therefore, that's the factor that if this were real life, you would have a survey of this done. And somebody at the office would spend a couple of hours figuring this out. And because you want to make it as long as you can get away with. But the contour will not make you or allow you to make it too long. So you're fighting against, you want to be long, it doesn't want you to be long, so what's the compromise? There will be somebody doing that stuff. We're not going to do that stuff. We don't have a survey to do that stuff. We're going to kind of guess. I think that the length of your prototype should not be any longer than 10 to 15 feet. Because I know it's not that long, right?
It's very short.
It's very short. Because what happens is, remember when we were standing there, we couldn't see past the flamingo towers? There's a big hump. In fact, none of this is straight outside of these 3 buildings. All of this is kind of like, it does a soft turn. It does like this, comes to the mirador, goes out there, hugging the post. But then we have a big hump here with a flamingo, and it's It's an aggressive one. It's a very big turn like this. All of that you have to deal with a small module, right? A small module. So let's make it 10 to 15. Let's go 15, right? Let's go 15 feet long. So 30 by 15, you're going to be designing in width, right? And what you will do is design them such that you can connect to the next one and the next one and the next one. Somebody will come up with this question, and it's an important and clever question. Let's address it now before somebody realizes. When you put these things together, you will have to turn them at some point. They would have to have a joiner, and I would imagine that joiner to be some kind of a rubber piece that would take compression and stuff. Do we have to bother or worry with that minutia? And I'm going to tell you not to worry. Right? This is, after all, not design 6 or 7. So what we're going to pretend is that these things will be engaged face to face like that. Okay? Even though you and I know that they would be turning at certain spots. And when you turn these two things, you create gaps. And those gaps would have to be architecturally resolved. And there's ways to do that. And these rubber, infillers would be the way to do that. I'm not going to make you do that because it's not part of what you need to learn now, and would get in the way of teaching you other more important things, right? So we pretend they come together like this, right? And the fact that they have to turn will become invisible in SketchUp, right? Okay. So what else?
How many prototypes of 30 and 15 do you want us to do?
Well, in total, 8 to 10.
8 to 10.
But the first week of discussion, I expect to see you turn in 4 to 5, so that we do 4 to 5 for a couple of weeks, and then a certain amount of time, not a couple of weeks, the first week, and then the following week you turn in another 4 to 5. You will by then have 8. At some point, you're going to have to, and we will be discussing them singularly, right? You will say something like, for instance, when you turn in the prototype for circulation, I will expect to see only one module, right? And we will look at it sectionally, and I'll see, and you'll tell me, this is the path for the bicycle, and this is the path for the pedestrian, and this thing in the middle is what prevents the bicyclist from running into the pedestrian. We'll have that discussion. And for that purpose, we only need to see one module. Now, you and I know that module would be multiplied 100 times to make the entire length. We're not going to see all of it. Your machine will begin crashing and freezing. We're going to look at them individually. At one point, before the animation, end of the semester, you'll have to put them together, right? To do the animation. I'll show you animations of other things that happen. So they will have to, at one point, be put together. But initially, separate and individual discussions of each one of these prototypes, right? What the city really wants, if it ever did anything like this, would be that the architect would turn into them like a box of Lego, where the city looks at these 10 to 12, whatever number of modules, and say, okay, I want these located around here. The architect would have a right? The architect at that point would know better than the city where they belong. But the city would want to say, okay, I want so many of these, and I want a lot of those. And so that's what you're doing. Turning in 10 of these prototypes to a client, in this case me. And then, of course, putting them together to show the final result. Right? How do they go into the water? Final issue. All of them important. This may be the most important one. They can do a number of things. One is they can be on piles. Right? When we were out there, I forgot to point at the little marina, but the marina is on piles. Those piles go in the water. And the wooden floor is attached to the pile. And nothing is attached to our seawall. Right? So it's an independent structure that is so close to us we can go on it, but it's not really imposing any load on us. So that's one system. It's a perfectly good system. There's the system of the pontoons, which we discussed earlier. That would be also a system that is not imposing upon the seawall. All of that there, those last 2 feet of floor where we were actually standing is seawall. And that belongs to the city, all over the place. The city is responsible for it. We cannot do anything. We cannot drive a nail, right, without notifying the city. Because, well, imagine the risk. I mean, here you can actually penetrate the garage and flood it. So, and at other places, erode and eventually break it, and that too would be eroded. So those 2 systems do not engage the seawall. But there's ways you can engage the seawall by communicating with the city and getting a permission. So what would that mean? You can use anchorage, bracketing. You can have brackets engage the seawall, come out and hold the floor, or help to hold the floor. That would be system number 3, right? Or a combination. You can have something attached to the outside of this, the seawall, a bracket of some sort, sustaining this portion of the floor. This is dry land, that's the water there. And then if the floor goes out too much and you don't want to be too aggressive with this bracket here, you can have a pile here, okay? So that would be a combination, okay? Let's try to do a combination. If you want to engage the seawall, don't try to make the seawall do everything, because that would require of more, drilling and stuff in it. So let's just not go that way. But there would be, a cantilevering system could be done such that the seawall carries all of the load. Let's not use that. If you're going to touch the seawall, help it with a pile here, right? Or, like I said, independent systems like the pontoon or the pile system. And then you would just make sure that the floor comes so close to the top of the seawall, the sea cap, that you could just walk from one to the other, with an inch separation or less. Materials. There is a reason why so much of it is done in wood. So wood would be a great material to use. Concrete, you're welcome to use it. It comes with a number of problems, and that is that if it will have to be reinforced concrete, and that would require that you do concrete so thick so that the rebar doesn't get, so that the seawater doesn't get to the rebar. That would be so extremely heavy, and in fact, even ugly looking. This wants to be light about these things, right?
Hammocks.
What?
Hammocks.
Hammocks in a hurricane,
Homeless.
right? A homeless. So those would be things that you would be discussing at the office, right? If you came up with a question like that. But initially, it's a great question, or a great possible use, if you can figure those other things out. And perhaps one last point is, we will not be holding you responsible for, the safety of a hurricane. There's codes that would regulate everything that happens there that you're not going to even be looking at. But I would like you to address a few things. If there's objects in there that may present a problem during high winds, and how do you secure them? If you're going to have a floating floor system on pontoons, how do you secure that? It would be going up and down and up and down. It could even perhaps fly off of the hinges and break into or break and go into a boat or something. So there's, depending on what you present to me, I'm going to sometimes ask you, okay, how does this not fly off and kill someone? Right? So I'm going to force you to be at least aware of the fact that once or twice a week we do get hurricane warnings here. And somebody from the city, a team of people, 100 of them, will have to run out here and secure things. How can they do it efficiently and safely for themselves? And I'll wait for your answer. But that's going to be an issue, right? think I may have told one or two of you of one day where we had a hurricane, but it wasn't a big one. And even if it were, I've always written the hurricanes here because this building being built in 1965, we don't have drywall here anywhere in this building. This is all concrete, bunker style. So this is safer than anything I've known so far in Florida for a hurricane. So I usually stay here. But on this one occasion, I came out to these are hurricane-proof glass windows. And I was standing behind it, and the building next door, some building, was under construction or renovation at that point, and they had boarded up the openings with these plywoods. And one of them came off. And I don't know if you know how heavy plywood is, but it's one of these gigantic ones. You need two people to carry it. It was just floating in the air like a little piece of paper. And it was hovering like this. It reminded me of, Mary Poppins on her broom. In front of my glass, some 50 feet away, and it did this like 6 or 7 times. And I was just hypnotized by it, expecting it to fly right into my window. Thankfully, it went into the water. But things are picked up by the wind, and they become projectiles, and they can be deadly. Even the smallest of things. When Andrew hit, that I came out of I was at my parents' house, this was 20 years ago. Came out of the house, kitchen was gone, half of the house was gone. I'm standing in the terrace like this girl coming back from, the Wizard of Oz, coming back from the Twister. And I look at the frame of the slider, which was wood. A little leaf of grass, I swear to you, I'm not making this up. A little leaf of grass had hit it at such an angle and speed that it had penetrated it. And because it was so mind-boggling, and because I couldn't believe it myself, and I thought I was dreaming, I called my sister and brother before pulling it out, because I knew what I was going to be pulling out. And I told them to come here, and they stood right next to me, all of us adults. And I did this and pulled it out to have witnesses. They couldn't believe it. A leaf of grass. If that thing had gone through my neck, it would have come out the other side. It doesn't always happen. It would have to be the same angle and everything, but I swear to you, it went in like half an inch. It's just a regular leaf of grass.
Wood.
Into wood framing. Which is it's compressed wood. It's not regular wood. It's even harder. So anyway, enough of that. Any questions? Ooh, that's a good night. Close. Very good. I love Nikon was my favorite system.
You mentioned code. Do we need to comply ADA standards?
No. Good question though. Something like this, you would have to have ADA standards. The reason I don't remember that this is a more basic design where you have to. I want you to deal with formal issues more than you do things that you will be tackling in Designs 5 and 6, right? Design 5 at FIU or other places is called the Gateway. I used to teach it, and it's called the Gateway because if you're good enough, you go through it, and if you're not, that's when you stop. So it is curved. So your bay walk will have to be curved. But that brings to mind another question in my head. Some of you will be asking me, I know that some of you will be working on this right away, that's why I'm telling you all of these things ahead of time. Some of you will be asking me if you can go out. And you can. That would be...
So the boats will be the other side.
Well, the boats that we have here now, we're going to pretend will be moved away and something would be worked out with this building in the city, in the case of this building, if this were real. And the city would promise that if we gave them permission to do the bay walk in front of our building, they would then move the marina, and we would say yes, and everybody would be happy. So the marinas that we have present here now, we'll just pretend we're going to move them. But some of you are going to want to have, this is the bay walk, right? Some of you are going to want to have something sticking out like this because you may want to go out there and fish or what have you, I'll say yes to that.
Okay, so we can expand on that.
You can do this to it, except I will give you this other freedom, and that is these portions being unique, because I don't see too many of them, and they would be so specific. Don't have to be prototypes. They don't have to be modules. You understand? They could be whatever you want. And back to Oscar's question, can you do curvy things because they're unique, and they would be kind of done especially for that spot? You can make them in whatever shape you want, right? They would not be modular.
As far as limitations on length,
Yeah, no, let's not go all the way out to Star
course.
Island, but
Don't we want to link them
Star
to
to the Star Island, no, not a good idea. I don't think that.